majority in the parliamentary elections in France. What a debacle. But no hung parliament in Britain, a perfectly choreographed handover between one cheek and the other cheek of the British Uni Party, and the political system here is unsurprised but is shocked at the amount that's coming out between the two cheeks. Is AlanMilburn, is Douglas Alexander, is JacquiSmith, Old Labour, New Labour, My Labour? What kind of Labour are they? And with so many parliamentarians to pick from, why has Keir Starmer had to dig into the bowels of the Blair and Brown era to resurrect and make peers of some of the most discredited figures in the land in order to fill ministerial posts? We'll be reviewing all of that. Meanwhile, right now, Joe Biden is back home in the black spiritual church that his Puerto Rican parents used to take him to before he became the first black woman vice president in the United States. All will be revealed. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway. The mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway. The world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
What are you talking about? Just put your hand up when I have to start speaking. Well, does Biden have dementia? You'd think so if you saw the live footage that I'm watching from his home church, the one where he used to plot the next moves in the civil rights movement when he wasn't, of course. The one where he was arrested for trying to get near Nelson Mandela, except he wasn't that either. The meltdown of Joe Biden has reached such a critical stage that we now have almost 40,000 people voting on our poll. Does Biden have dementia? The 25th Amendment of the US Constitution surely must now kick in. His cabinet must declare that he is not fit to carry out his duties as president, as commander-in-chief of the world's mightiest army, on paper at least. We'll be talking to Bryce Greene later in the show about that. But of course, the dilemma for the Democrats is once they get rid of old Joe, they have KamalaHarris waiting next in line. The French elections have come up with quite surprising results. We'll bring them to you in the course of the show. But suffice to say, Marine Le Pen is not going to be the next Prime Minister of France. Neither is my friend Jean-Luc Mélenchon, and definitely neither is the nominee of President Macron. A hung parliament in a huge surge of second-round voting, massive increase in turnout, has produced a hung parliament in France. We'll be talking to the European guru, George Szamuely, about that later in the show. But let me start with the British elections. The handover between one cheek and the other cheek has produced a lot of effluent, no doubt. JacquiSmith, seriously, back as a minister in a Labour government, having been forced out of the government and then voted out of the parliament on the back of her expenses scandal, which shocked the nation when she was found as Britain's Home Secretary to have been submitting expense claims for the porn channel in her home. She blamed it on her husband, of course, and it might well have been. But she did say in 2012 that she did not deserve to be in the House of Lords as a result of her conduct as a Member of Parliament. Well, today she's back in the House of Lords and is a minister in your new government, as is little Douglas Alexander, as is AlanMilburn, the erstwhile Trotskyite, who is now back with the brief of continuing, indeed accelerating, the privatisation of Britain's National Health Service. The government that is taking shape in front of our eyes is even worse than the worst nightmare of anyone who was speculating about what a Keir Starmer government would look like. It's looking much uglier than your worst expectations. And it's all being done on a completely illegitimate, bogus, hoax parliamentary majority. The Labour Party got 1/3 of the votes in the election, 1/3 of the votes cast. Just 20% of the people eligible to vote. 4 in 5 of those who had a vote last Thursday did not cast it for Keir Starmer's new Labour Party. But with 1/3 of the vote, they have garnered 2/3 of the seats in the House of Commons, making it a rubber stamp assembly of a kind wearily familiar in European history. The leader will decide with his coterie of Blairite advisors, and the Parliament will duly rubber stamp it. The official opposition is no opposition at all. Rishi Sunak, the shoeshine boy, is on his way to California, and the Tories have almost nobody to pick from to be the official leader of the opposition. It's already clear that Nigel Farage, who got 4 million votes but only 5 members of Parliament because of Britain's disastrously disproportionate electoral system, he got more votes than the Liberal Democrats, who've got 71 MPs. Farage got more votes and has 5 MPs, one of those garnered late from Labour with just 90 of a majority. He almost paid 1 million votes per member of Parliament, but he's already the leader of the opposition, and he's going large on the disproportionality of this electoral system, which has landed us with this monstrosity of a Labour government. The irony of ironies, the man on whom Keir Starmer heaped excoriation at every turn, insulting at every turn, witch hunting all his supporters, namely Jeremy Corbyn, actually scored far better in his 2 general election campaigns as Labour leader than Keir Starmer has. The man who was changing it to My Labour, the one who was going to broaden its appeal, the one that was going to create an entirely new kind of Labour Party, polled 1 million fewer votes than Jeremy Corbyn. His share of the vote in an election in which the entire deep state, the entire mass media, the entire polling industry, everything in his favour, and he got fewer votes than the much insulted, much blackguarded Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn, despite every effort made by the worst scoundrels of New Labour's past, Neil Kinnock, the Welsh windbag and others, trooping up to Islington North to try and defeat Corbyn by fair means and foul, including telling people that, yes, Jeremy is the Labour MP, so vote Labour. The result was a crushing defeat for Keir Starmer and a great victory for Jeremy Corbyn, and I congratulate him on that. Keir Starmer's own vote halved. He got half as many votes as he got the last time he stood in that constituency. Half as many. He got in, of course, but Andrew Feinstein, his redoubtable independent opponent, came second with an outstanding result. As for people like me and people who think like me, the candidates of the Workers' Party of Britain and the independents that we endorsed, Many of them did astoundingly well. In the Workers' Party, we polled 210,000 votes, despite a complete media blackout, despite not being in one single opinion poll, despite being invisible to the mass of the electorate throughout the entire election campaign. We scored the biggest left of Labour vote that has ever been achieved in history. 210,000 people voting for the Workers' Party and tens of thousands, scores of thousands voting for the independents that we supported. And we came so close in some of the seats. In 2 Birmingham seats, we almost captured rock-solid Labour fortresses from the Labour candidates. The independent Ahmed Yaqub came so close to overhauling the largest Labour majority in the West Midlands, but fell short. I, myself, fell short by 1,500 votes. Say too much about it on legal advice, but multiple legal challenges are now with the relevant presently able to talk about them. But the end result is that Britain has a government that will not change anything of note. The very first call that Keir Starmer made was to President Biden to assure him that if he's headed to war with Russia, with China, with Iran, with all of them, maybe all of them put together, we will be with him. We will march behind the old man wherever he wants to go. The second call was to Benjamin Netanyahu. Yes, I'm not making that up. Keir Starmer called Benjamin Netanyahu, and to quote the Prime Minister's official spokesman, he thanked Mr. Netanyahu. Thanked him, don't you know? And looked forward to further deepening the relationship between our 2 countries, Britain and Israel. This despite the mass revolt in the Labour coalition that led to a loss of millions of votes for Labour in the general election. Both the people who voted against Labour and those who stayed at home in disgust, oftentimes with nobody to vote for that they could express their feelings. Despite that, Starmer wants to further deepen relations between Britain and Netanyahu's Israel. And he's appointed the son of Sue Gray, the neutral civil servant who was formerly a publican, oddly, in the north of Ireland. Her son, parachuted in to a Labour seat, is now charged with bringing Britain closer to the European Union in defiance of the wishes of the 17.4 million people who voted for Brexit at the general election. You couldn't make any of this up. Neither could you make up the state of Joe Biden. He says that he's going on. He took counsel from his most trusted advisor, one Hunter Biden, the crack-smoking, underage sex-practicing felon who's about to go into prison. He persuaded Joe that he must go on and on. And so the Democrats are in a pretty pickle. They were in it anyway. If Joe had agreed to go, they are legally bound to run KamalaHarris as their candidate, a woman even less popular than Joe Biden. And if they were able, by any means, fair means or foul, to persuade both Joe and Kamala to go, Big Mike Obama, Hillary Clinton, and some tailor's dummy in California were waiting in the wings. But none of it will make any difference. Donald Trump is going to win a landslide second term as the President of the United States of America. And he will confront a European alliance where Keir Starmer may be entirely dependable as a transatlantic servant, but the British people are scarcely behind the policy or the personalities that are ruling Britain. He will survey a France where the president is now a lame duck with no ability to get his policies through the National Assembly in France. He will survey a Germany where bonkers Baerbock and little soldier Schulz cannot muster 20% between them. Both parties, SPD and Greens, put together are on less than 20% in the public opinion polls. And he'll face something else. A revolt amongst the leaders of old Europe. Old Europe. Hungary doesn't get much older. Its prime minister has just left Moscow. He's on a one-man peace mission, being assailed, having rotten eggs tossed at him from the commanding heights of the European Union bureaucracy. But as he puts it, Hungary will not go to war with Russia. And despite being members of NATO and the European Union, they will not permit either to go to war with Russia either. And that the time has come for a negotiated end to the Ukrainian conflict, which should never and need never have started in the first place. The truth is, the Slovakian Prime Minister would have been with him if someone hadn't tried to assassinate him and he didn't still have a piece of bullet inside his body. But he has declared that he is there in spirit. Old Europe, which has no intention of going to war and risking the complete incineration, obliteration of the European mainland by a madcap American president, senile, demented American president, a wooden, cardboard, plywood British Prime Minister, a dead or dying French president, a dead or dying German government. They're not going to allow Europe to be destroyed by such people. And Donald Trump probably likes the sound of all of that. He doesn't fancy NATO much, and certainly isn't going to go to war with Russia, over which side of a line Kupiansk should lie on when it's been in 4 countries over the last 100 years. Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night. It is the mother of all talk shows.
I always have been and always will be firmly opposed to any changes in the law to allow assisted dying or assisted suicide. I believe the threat to the dependent, the most vulnerable, the most desperate in our society is simply too great, and therefore assisted dying or legalized assisted suicide must never become law in this country. Thank you, George. Thank you very much.
Bravo. I agree entirely, and spoke, I hope, powerfully in Parliament against this euthanasia, legalized murder. I have the most profound feelings of opposition to it, which, as you say, does not mean that the pressures on people who are terminally ill, who have lost hope, are not themselves profound, and that the pressures on people without pay and without any kind of remittance or relief are condemned to years, decades of caring for people who are terminally ill, helpless, hopeless, and so on, that these are not deep, deep mines of anguish and of pain and of doubt. But I have a moral and religious obligation to oppose it. If capitalism was a person and it could kill anyone that it liked, it would kill the one that will never again turn a penny of profit. it's very easy to imagine relatives, even family members, even husbands and wives that would like to see the back of you, either because they think you've suffered long enough or because they'd quite like to see what's in your will and quite like to spend it. I wouldn't trust, and I don't think you should, anybody to decide whether you live or die. As a religious believer, I believe that that is God's job, not yours. This is a subject we'll have to return.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, I'm trying to make sense of the French language material that I'm getting in. It looks like that the new Popular Front is the biggest party in the new French Parliament. 172 to 192 seats. And that Marine Le Pen is in third place, 132 to 152. These are just predictions at this minute. But if true, it means that a remarkable last-minute change of mind has taken place in France, and that the plurality, at least, of the French electorate has decided to follow the kind of policy program I discussed with Mr. Jeremy Corbyn on the telephone just yesterday or the day before. I had an important telephone conversation with him, and I have told him that I am now going to announce this evening that I, the Workers' Party, and I believe millions in the country, call on Jeremy Corbyn to launch a British version of the new Popular Front. He may or may not want to form a party himself. Others will remain in their own parties. But he must be the leader of a Popular Front. He's not a perfect leader, Mr. Corbyn. None of us are perfect leaders. But he is the leader. And he does have a seat in Parliament with which to lead the millions of people who today and increasingly over the next months and years will reject the direction of Keir Starmer, reject the geriatric Blair and Brown era sweepings of the Blair and Brown tavern of the past. The sweepings, the dregs of Blairism will reject the policy, personalities and direction of a Keir Starmer government. So, Mr. Corbyn, I told you I was going to say these words, and I now formally say them. On behalf of the Workers' Party of Britain, we ask you to lead and unite all the forces of the left, of the radical forces in Britain who reject neoliberalism, who reject endless war, who oppose genocide. Mr. Corbyn, lead us. We will follow you. And I very much hope to hear positive news on that from you by return. Does Biden have dementia, yes or no? Well, this poll, in which almost 40,000 people have already voted, is indicative of two things. The vast majority of respondents believe that Biden indeed is demented. But the Ukrainian lobby, much of it bought, B-O-T, much of it bought, B-O-U-G-H-T, much of it automated, some of it simply silly, can only handle a poll on one portal at a time. Because again on Twitter, they have sought to hijack this poll. They have miserably failed, incidentally. But if I tell you that on Telegram, only 3% of the respondents think that Biden does not have dementia. On the YouTube community poll, only 4%. On the YouTube stream, only 3%. But on Twitter, 32% think that Biden is a spring chicken. And watching him at that black church this very evening is of no concern to them. But the overwhelming numbers are a pronouncement of idiocy on the part of the American presidency. And that ought to be a cause for concern. A big welcome, by the way, if you are joining us on the radio on KPFK, that's 90.7 FM across Los Angeles and Southern California. If you want to call the show, it's toll-free in the US and Canada. It's +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in the UK and Ireland, 0808 196 5522. And in the rest of the world, it's 44203 966 2625. Bryce Greene is one of our best guests. He knows everything about what's happening in America and farther afield. You may recall his groundbreaking work, if you'll forgive the pun, on the Nord Stream 2 environmental disaster caused by the United States empire and all the lies that were told about it thereafter before it became a non-subject, a subject no longer talked about. You can talk about cows farting in a field and that being a real methane problem, but you can't talk about the blowing up of the Nord Stream 2, which released more methane into the atmosphere than have ever been released in any single event in the whole history of the planet Earth. Bryce Greene is an independent writer, political analyst, and contributor to fairness and accuracy in reporting. Wouldn't that be a fine thing, Bryce Greene? Fairness and accuracy in reporting. We'll come back to that. But let me ask you first about the visible meltdown of the Biden presidency. Is it going to melt down into nothing? Or is old Joe going to limp like a horse on its way to the glue factory to the starting line in November?
Well, it's really hard to tell. If you had asked me about 2 weeks ago, I would have had a different answer. I would have said that the Democratic Party is hell-bent on keeping this, this corpse essentially alive and keeping him walking around all the way till November. Also, they can carry out, the Israeli genocide in Gaza, and so they can carry out the proxy war in Ukraine, and so they can escalate in Taiwan. All of these things seem to be part of the Democratic Party's plan. But after the debate performance, which, everyone saw that Biden is virtually incapable of holding his own against a normal human being in the evening after he's sundowning. After they saw that, everyone in the media and in the party establishments and in the political scene writ large, they seem to suddenly wake up and realize that maybe Joe Biden might not be the man for the moment, that Joe Biden might not be as cognizant of his surroundings as his supporters claim to be. And what's really surprising about this is that these issues were pretty readily apparent, not just in the last year before the campaign started, but also in 2019, when he was primarying to get the nomination to run in 2020. The issues were clear back then. I mean, you could see videos of him rambling, of him turning and trying to shake someone's hand who wasn't there, forgetting what city he's in, and generally flubbing his words. All of that was in public view.
He confused his wife with his sister.
Precisely, and like confusing the president of Egypt with the president of Mexico. I mean, this is a confused man with his hand on a nuclear button. But everyone with a brain and integrity could have seen this in 2019, and some of us did. And we were pilloried, we were attacked, we were told, oh, well, he's not old, he's just has a stutter that he's getting over. And he used to have that as a kid, but he got over it, but now it's coming back. Well, why is it coming back? It's coming back because his brain is turning to soup. And right now, the world is at such an inflection point that we can't really afford another incompetent leader on the world stage trying to make decisions that affect everyone. And so the Democratic Party, the media elites, and the people who really run this country, they seem to have flipped the switch. It is now okay to criticize President Biden. It is now okay to say Biden must go. You even have Democratic Party members. You have congressmen, sitting congressmen, saying that Joe Biden needs to go. And so all of this pressure seems to be mounting in a way that might end up with Joe Biden off the ballot in November. The Democratic National Convention has not convened yet. And so officially, Joe Biden isn't technically the nominee yet. And so the Democratic Party and the delegates that show up to the convention have the ability to choose someone else to be the nominee. Now, there's all this sorts of talk about who it's going to be. Assuming Biden leaves, people are talking about KamalaHarris. People are throwing out the name Gavin Newsom. Hey, we've even heard people throw out the name Pete Buttigieg. But the problem is, and no Democratic pundit seems to be grasping this, is that Joe Biden's issues aren't necessarily that he's old. They aren't necessarily that, he's unable to complete a sentence. The president doesn't necessarily need to do that. What people are revolting against in general is the fact that Biden represents a continuity of failed policies over the last 40 years, since the Reagan years, through Clinton, through Bush, through Obama. All of it has been neoliberal policy of gutting the middle class, gutting the public sector, increased privatization, attacking Social Security systems and social safety nets. All of that has been part of Biden's policy. And one of the crowning achievements of Biden's policy, according to him, are the wars that he's been doing. He was asked recently in an interview, and I can't recall which one, but it was one of these cover your ass interviews that they've been.
I think it was Papadopoulos.
Stephanopoulos, I think. I think he was saying that. He's been too busy focusing on all these wars to get a grip on his campaign and to get a feel for how to actually run the country. He's doing all of these wars rather than focusing on the issues that make America, safer, healthier, and just improve the lives of the general public. So he's been focusing on Ukraine. He's been focusing on escalating in Gaza. He's been focusing on escalating in Taiwan. If that's what Biden has to offer, well, what are the alternatives? Do we think that KamalaHarris is going to offer an alternative to neoliberalism and imperialism? Do we think that Gavin Newsom is going to offer an alternative to neoliberalism and imperialism? No, the only reason that these names are being brought up is because the establishment is very confident that those people will continue Biden's policies, will continue the empire's policies, the policies that have been in place, regardless of whichever side of the uniparty is in power. And so the fundamental issue with the American political system has not been addressed. And even if Biden were to be replaced, even if he were to collapse dead today, that would not solve any of the party's issues. The fact is that the Democratic Party does not represent the interest of the general public, and they only have one selling point to the public, that they're not Trump, that they can avoid a Trump presidency if they just get behind, the Democrats and vote blue no matter who, as the saying goes. But again,
we'll come to Trump in a minute, Bryce. Although the smart papers have broken with Biden, the New Yorker, sections at least of the New York Times, that have doubtedly supported him until now, and although 5 Congress members, Democrats, have now called on him to go, if he digs in and says, no, I won't go, hell no, I won't go, then I take your point about the convention, but there would have to be a legal route to the convention overturning the decisions of the primary ballots. I mean, Biden was chosen in a rigged primary system, admittedly, gerrymandered one where other candidates were kept off the ballot and so on. But there still must be a legal strength to being the man who won the Democratic Party's primaries if he refuses to budge.
Well, this is actually an interesting aspect of our political system, is that the primaries actually don't functionally matter. the delegates can vote for whoever they want. They can decide for whoever they want at the Democratic National Convention. In fact, this was an issue back in 2016 and 2020 when Democratic Party elites were very concerned about a Bernie Sanders insurgent candidacy. They said that, oh, well, even if he gets the maximum number of delegates from each state, there's still a layer of super delegates that are not beholden to whatever the state's primary decided. And there are many states that don't even hold their delegates to the what the primary process has been. And so the Democratic Party, they were actually sued for rigging the primaries against Bernie. And what they argued, and they argued successfully, was that they're under no obligation to listen to what the voters say. They're under no obligation to nominate the person who got the most votes in a primary because they're a private entity. The Democratic Party is not some sort of, public sector, public interest organization that's run by the general public who get to say in how it's out. No, it is a private entity run by a select group of people who can run it how they like. The Democratic veneer is really just that. It's designed to manufacture consent and to engineer this stasis of consensus among the public. If there was no Democratic primary process, the Democratic Party could function the same way, but it'd have a harder time selling itself to the people. So if they want to kick out Biden, they can very well do so. If they want to keep Biden on, they can also do so. It's up to them, and the people have to deal with it.
Now, Joe, as I said earlier, is currently claiming to be back home in a black Baptist church. He's practically painting himself black. KamalaHarris, who used to run as America's first Indian. Sorry?
He said that in one of these many gaffes, he actually said that he was, I think, the first black woman president to a first black president. So one of those, incoherent scrambled egg sentences that he says, but continue.
He did. I saw him do that. KamalaHarris, who in the beginning of her political career used to describe herself as of Indian descent, and she was spearheading the mass arrival of Indians in the American political system. She's metamorphosed into a black politician also. That seems to suggest that the black constituency is practically the only one they've got left that they can depend on. Can they depend on it?
Well, that's difficult to say. The Democratic Party has long been doing this insulting thing where they will put a black face in front of black voters and say that, you should be grateful. You should be grateful that you're represented in the halls of power. The policies that they're pushing, that doesn't matter. As long as they have a black face, with Obama, they said, all your problems are over. They weren't. They got KamalaHarris as a vice president of the White House. They said, all your problems are over. They weren't. They believe that black people are so simple-minded that all they need to do is see a black face on television and then they get their vote. There's a lot of time and energy put into keeping black people in that mindset. But as conditions worsen and reality becomes more undeniable, more and more people are waking up to the reality that the system, even if it has a black face on it, does not care about them and doesn't work for them. Kamala Harris, the only reason that she is vice president now is because she is a black woman who is compliant to power. Back in the 2020 election, Joe Biden explicitly said, I'm going to pick a black woman candidate. Had nothing to do with their politics, nothing to do with their policies, achievements, qualifications, or anything. They said, we want to put a black face there. That was clearly one of these public relations exercises that I've been talking about. And Kamala Harris, she was, prominent senator in California, deeply unpopular, mind you. She couldn't even win her own home state when she was running for president, but she was compliant to power. She showed herself as a prosecutor. She was willing to lock up people for dumb things. She's willing to vote for wars. She's willing to, say what the script says. She's willing to do what she's told. And so she was selected to be the vice president. Does that mean that she'll make a good president? Well, it depends on who you ask. If you ask the people of this country who, have to go to work, pay bills, pay rent, all that stuff, she'll be exactly like everyone else. But of course, if you ask the oligarchs who run this country, they'll say that she's great because she does her job. She follows rules, she follows her orders, and she has a face that allows her to weather some criticism from some liberals.
Now, let's turn to Trump. There were some signs that he was making progress, not just amongst American black people, but Latinos. In fact, quite significant progress in the Latino community. Of course, his base is white, but the kaleidoscope he's going to need to triumph would appear to be hoving into view on all the opinion polling in all of the swing battleground states. Trump's got this by a big margin. Do you think that will be the outcome?
I think that will be the outcome, and I've thought so for a long time for some of the reasons that I've talked about. The Democratic Party doesn't have a vision that they're offering the world. They don't have a utopia world that they're trying to build, that they're fighting for, that people know that if they vote for the Democrats, they'll get, a better world. They don't have that. Trump has a fake version of that, make America great again, or I guess it's keep America great, or what is it, take our country? I'm losing track. But, he's able to sell this image of strength and power to the American public because he's long been one of the most prominent con men in America. He's a carnival barker. He's able to say what's on his mind and just lie and say whatever he wants to get elected. And that has resonated with the public, especially when juxtaposed to Joe Biden, who has been deeply sedated, to say the least, for the last few years. And so while Trump's policies don't necessarily offer any significant change with the status quo, in fact, there's a very good case that Trump might be worse than Biden. I mean, you've heard of the 2025 Project. You know how lunatic right-wingers are with some of their religious theocratic beliefs that Trump enables. There's every reason to believe that Trump might be more disastrous in Israel and more disastrous in Ukraine and more disastrous in Taiwan. But the fact is that the Democrats don't seem to care. They market themselves as the antidote to Trump, and they say that if you don't vote for us, you'll get Trump. But they don't seem to care. They're not putting forth a candidate that actually has a good chance to beat Trump. And they knew this going in. They were well aware that in 2016, Bernie was the candidate to beat Trump, but they picked Hillary. In 2020, Bernie was the candidate to beat Trump, and they picked Biden. In 2024, they didn't even bother having a real primary because they just realized that everybody who could run was compliant enough, and they stepped aside and let Biden sleepwalk into the nomination. And so that is why you see Trump surge. The Trump campaign right now, all they have to do is say, I'm not Joe. I'm not Joe. Hey, your life is bad right now. Well, I'm not the president, but I can be, and I can make it better. That's an easy pitch, regardless of how horrible the man actually genuinely is.
Sounds familiar over here. Bryce Greene, as always, a tour de force. Thanks for your presence here on the mother of all talk shows. Does Biden have dementia, yes or no? You can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my Twitter, my X, on the YouTube community poll, and on the YouTube stream. And if you are watching on the YouTube stream, or on Rumble, or on any of the other platforms that allow you to share, please share the fact that this show is off and running. Apologies for the technical difficulties at the beginning of the show, but we are now moving into top gear because it's your show now. I'll take a quick break and then it's your calls right up to the hour. Stay tuned. Let me say that you can listen to the audio-only version of MOATS on our MOATS podcast, and the numbers on that are going through the roof. Just search MOATS with George Galloway on Apple, Spotify, Google, or whichever platform you listen to your podcasts on. In recent weeks, it's been the #1 political podcast in Benin, Jordan, the Gambia, Qatar, Jamaica, Ghana, Iceland, Malaysia, Singapore, Sweden, and the Philippines. #1 political podcast in all those countries. Truly, truly phenomenal. Do you know that BBC News has lost 40% of its audience in the last 2 years? It's official. And of course, that is the sensible thing to do. But to get people to tune in and change course and listen to a radically different point of view is even more difficult. But it's happening. And the numbers that we are racking up are now in their millions.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Wow, this poll is doing record business. Could be an all-time record depending on the next hour. You can vote on my Telegram, on my X, my Twitter, on the YouTube community poll, and on the YouTube stream. The podcast, as you've just heard, is doing extraordinarily well around the world. It's been in the top 5 in South Africa this week, as well as all those others that we just told you about in that clip. You can download the MOATS podcast by scanning the QR code on your screen right now. Let's go to Dublin and talk with Declan. Always a pleasure. Declan, welcome.
Hello, George. I heard Neil Kinnock commenting on you losing your seat, okay? Now, I was disgusted and amazed at what he said. He was like an ignorant football supporter. He actually punched his... Well, he tried, because he's, 1 foot in the grave, to punch his fist in the air, saying he was delighted that you were gone, that you were a horrible person. That's the first thing he said. The more important thing he said, that when he was leader of the Labour Party, he was conniving morning, noon and night to kick you out of the party. Now, this is before Tony Blair, and you were in good standing with the Labour Party. Mr. Kinnock got himself and his wife very big jobs in the European Union, so he did well out of it. I was quite surprised that they had to draft him up to Jeremy Corbyn's Islington constituency. Why, I don't know. I'm sure the people in Islington had a good laugh at it. That chap just totally disgusted me. I'm not anti-Welsh. I've a million times more respect for Mandy Rice-Davies than I have for anybody like him. The other point I want to say, and it's connected with this, and it's connected with what you said about Jeremy Corbyn, proposed new party, etc. You keep using that metaphor about the two cheeks. What I think is much more appropriate is they're selling two forms of Coca-Cola and Pepsi, not even Coca-Cola and Pepsi, low-grade muck. And what they're saying is, don't drink Iron Brew in Scotland. Well, that's finished with the Scottish nationalists. Don't drink Coca-Cola. We're the Pepsi party. And what the good English people do, and they're no different from here in Ireland, is when they want to change, they move from the Tories to the Liberal Democrats. And now, of course, you have a smaller brand of cola there as well. And something similar with the Labour Party. So what I think the British have to do, and the Irish and everybody else, is they need a new conversation and stop drinking Coca-Cola and Pepsi. And I think through your party, through those Muslim people, I've been reading the Israeli press about them, and they think there's something sinister and subversive in Muslims in England voting against the genocide in Palestine. But I think all those people in British civil society, including Jeremy Corbyn, Diane Abbott, Ken Livingstone, and very many more, have to have a conversation about how to wean the British and everybody else away from these Coca-Cola and Pepsi parties, where
yeah, of course, that's long overdue, Declan, and I regret that Mr. Corbyn didn't make a complete break from the Labour Party until 4 weeks ago. If he had led all of his supporters out of the Labour Party 4 years ago, then he would have had a bigger party than Mélenchon in France. He would have had a bigger party than Keir Starmer has got in his Labour Party, my Labour Party, as he describes it. Going back to the beginning, nobody knows who Neil Kinnock is. Those who know who he is know he's the man from the Welsh Valleys that betrayed the miners. They know that he made a career out of excoriating the European Union, only for him, his wife, his son, his daughter to make millions and millions of pounds out of the European Union. Anybody who knows him, which is an increasingly small group of people, know that he made a career out of lashing the putrefying corpses of the House of Lords just immediately prior to donning an ermine robe and being a member of the House of Lords, and his wife also a member of the House of Lords. So, frankly, the hatred of Neil Kinnock I wear not even as a badge of honour, a little tiny pin maybe, because pretty soon no one will have heard of him at all. But the wider subject that you raise is the important one. I don't know, Jeremy says he doesn't want to form a party. That's fine by me. I've got my own party. I'll be staying in it anyway. But what I would like him to do is to announce a new Popular Front, like the one that has just, I can tell you officially, won the French parliamentary elections. Now, Mélenchon's programme is exactly the programme that Mr. Corbyn and myself would extend. In fact, it's bolder in some respects. It returns France, or seeks to return France to retirement at 60, when in Britain it's at 70. It jacks up the national minimum wage in France by about 40%. It is a bold and radical programme that would transform the lives of the working people of France were it to be able to be implemented. And now Mélenchon is the candidate for Prime Minister with the largest number of seats. And what are the Macronists going to do now? Are they going to put Mélenchon in as Prime Minister, or are they going to put LePen, who came third, in as the Prime Minister? I think there's a fair chance that my friend Jean-Luc Mélenchon is the next Prime Minister of France. How about that? Gayatri, get the Eurostar booked. We're on our way to the Élysée, well, at least to the National Assemblée. Thanks, Declan. Kestrel says the Workers' Party got 210,194 votes with a media blanket ban, total blackout. Plaid Cymru got 194,000 votes, i.e. 15,000 fewer than we did. And it had full media coverage and inclusion in television debates. Democracy, shamocracy. Go shove it in the duopoly's backside, says Kestrel. Old School Pete says Joe Biden's the healthiest corpse in politics. Don't worry, it's all good. And Paul Metz-Cohen says designed to manufacture consent. Sounds a perfect description of what the mainstream media are doing in the UK. Absolutely. On line 2 in Portland, Oregon is Matt. But on the UK elections, go ahead, Matt.
Oh, I'm so glad to see Jeremy Corbyn got back in. I found it like Richard Medhurst, how they were bragging how they got you out. And he believes Sunak pushed up these elections to get you out because he did not like the fact that you won in Rochester. And so I think and I agree with Richard on that he pushed these elections to purposely get you out. And the Zionists are all celebrating. The papers are going, yes, we got rid of George Galloway. And it's like, you're not really going anywhere. You're still going to work to get, and they forgot more. What was it? 5 people besides Jeremy Corbyn that they didn't want got elected. And so they actually kind of did themselves in focusing on you. They didn't notice these other people like Jeremy Corbyn getting in. And so they did themselves a disservice.
They got 5 for
focusing
1,
on you. Yeah. And, it's like, yeah, and our whole thing, we're a joke. That debate was so funny. I guarantee people in the world were laughing so hard at how bad Biden did. And Trump actually was amazing for the first time being quiet. Yeah, when he speaks, he says he lies. But the thing is, he learned to shut his mouth and let Biden just ramble on. At one point, I swear to God,
yeah,
Biden
he doesn't have to do anything. As Bryce Greene just said, hey, I'm not Joe. That has to be his election pitch. The Daily Telegraph gave the game away yesterday in a front page, which I have now framed. It said, goodbye, Galloway. This is a triumph for Israel. I've got it framed. You think I've gone away? You really think I've gone away? You really think you won't see me back in Parliament again, you fools? I have now served 7 times in the British Parliament. 3 of them from outside of the mainstream political system. I've beaten Labour in Bethnal Green. I've beaten Labour in Bradford West. I've beaten Labour in Rochdale. And I'll beat them again in Rochdale or somewhere else. But whether I'm in Parliament or whether I'm not, I'm here. And so are you all over the world. And so is George Szamuely, the European political guru, our doctor of philosophy and knowledge. He's coming up right after this short break. Stay tuned.
A new dawn has broken, has it not?
He had that Clinton thing. His eyes were round and big and smiley, and he was very charming.
He became this incredible pop idol kind of prime minister.
I think most people who have dealt with me think I'm a pretty straight sort of guy, and I am.
New Labour was backed by the most powerful media interests because they realised he was representing them.
He was caught red-handed trading policy in return for hard cash from a businessman.
America has no truer friend than Great Britain.
Both Bush as well as Tony Blair are now wanting to plunge the world into a holocaust.
JP Morgan paid him off for the Iraq war. The man is a war criminal.
Is Tony Blair a war criminal? In my opinion, yes.
Most definitely.
The pursuit of money has become the dominant theme in your life.
All these relationships are, in most people's estimation, corrupt relationships.
No previous Labour Prime Minister has behaved in this shameful, money-grubbing way.
How do you sleep at night? You know, it's that. It's as a person.
Does Biden have dementia? Yes or no? 41,342 of you have voted already. 97% on Telegram say yes. 68% on Twitter say yes. 96 on the YouTube community poll and 96 on the YouTube stream. Let's get this to 50,000. Then we'll send it over the pond to the president in the White House. Big welcome if you're listening to us on radio, as well as those who are watching around the world. If you're on radio, KPFK 90.7 FM across Los Angeles and Southern California. Big hello to you. George Szamuely is Senior Research Fellow at Global Policy Institute and author of the wonderful book Bombs for Peace, NATO's Humanitarian War on Yugoslavia. George, welcome back. Dr. George, I should say. Dramatic result in France. I've asked Gayatri to book the tickets for the Eurostar. We'll have to go through and see Prime Minister Mélenchon. Is that how you see it?
No, actually, I'm sorry to say, I doubt very much whether Jean-Luc Mélenchon will be Prime Minister. It's a very strange outcome because essentially you got a whole bunch of politicians who collaborated and decided that they would, they would drop out in favor of somebody who came in number two, and in order to keep out the National Rally. So you've got that. They've managed to push National Rally into third place, but the downside is you now have a lot of politicians elected to the National Assembly who don't really agree on very much, and they're going to have real difficulties forming any kind of a government. It's one thing to form an electoral alliance to keep out the National Rally, but now when it comes to government, I think it's going to be very difficult. And there are many parties there within, if you count the Ensemble, Macron's Ensemble, and then of course the New Popular Front, there are many people there who refuse to work with Jean-Luc Mélenchon. So I think that the chances of his becoming prime minister are quite slim.
Gayatri, cancel the tickets. The outcome is in complete contradiction to all of the opinion polls, all of which showed LePen coming first, and she came last. Give us a picture of how that happened.
Well, I think that what really threw the polling into turmoil was these alliances. I think something like, I can't remember the exact number, but maybe about 230 candidates dropped out.
Over
That's
200,
a huge
yeah.
number. Yeah, exactly. So it's a huge number. And so therefore, by doing that, you skewered the actual final results. And I think the polling just didn't take into account just how huge an impact that would have, getting so many people just dropping out, and then essentially people get a choice. It's either National Rally or it's something else. And so I think that's why the polling was so wrong. However, I do think we should still wait a little bit this evening when the count starts coming in, because there have been times in the past when the exit polls have proven wrong. I think there probably won't be, but one should be a little bit cautious, rushing out and saying that this is the final result.
Does this vindicate Macron's apparently crazy idea of calling a snap election?
I think it does. I mean, if these results hold, then Macron will seem very smart. I mean, everyone was calling him an idiot in the last few weeks, saying, God, this is such a crazy thing. And then he'll say, yeah, I told you that when push comes to shove, the French will not vote for the National Rally. And that really has been true. I mean, ever since, Marine Le Pen's father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, he ran against Jacques Chirac in 2002 and got absolutely trounced. France's elite has been committed to the project of keeping National Rally out of power, and they figure that a very large proportion of France cannot vote for a party run by a Le Pen. And I think Macron still believes that however much things have changed and however much National Rally has become more mainstream and acceptable, that when push comes to shove, France will not vote for a National Rally government.
Well, of course, ontology is important. It's arguable that under Jean-Marie Le Pen, They were a fascist formation. LePen, the original LePen, was from a family of Vichy Nazi collaborators who sent Jews on the trains to the concentration camps, the death camps, the gas chambers. It was, I think, entirely correct to describe the earlier iteration of the Front National as a fascist formation. Nowadays, Marine Le Pen, well, is she a fascist? She is 100% supporter of Israel. I don't know if that's a qualification or a disqualification. She's in support of NATO sanctions against Russia. She's opposed to sending troops like Macron said he wanted to do. She's no longer proposing French exit from the European Union or from the Euro. She's a bit like Meloni, isn't she? Sort of living on whatever past laurels in the far right, but actually she's just a centrist like all the others, no?
She's a centrist and an opportunist, and that's not a very good combination. And one other thing that you omitted from that list is that she also promised to withdraw from NATO's integrated military command, which is really the minimum that you would expect, at least to recall the great days of de Gaulle, because that's what de Gaulle did. He withdrew from NATO's integrated military command. But even on that, she has waffled. And so, and as you say, when she's waffled completely on Ukraine, well, she's for sanctions, but she just doesn't want sanctions that hurt France. She wants to send weapons, but they have to be defensive weapons, not offensive weapons. So it's all over the place. But to be honest, I mean, a little bit like Macron himself and, like Meloni herself, that is just trying to please all constituencies. But you're right. And her support for Israel is actually par for the course for almost all of the far right political movements in Europe, whether it's, so-called far right, like Geert Wilders, Viktor Orban, and so they're all very, very much fervent supporters of Israel. So it's hard to say what that this far right designation means. The only problem with her, of course, is that she does carry the name Le Pen, and I think however much she has distanced her party from her father, and she's even kicked her father out of the party, she still has the name Le Pen, and when people hear it, they think of her father.
Yeah, maybe she needs to remarry. The situation in Hungary that you described as far right, in quotes, I know that you meant that in quotes. Orban is proving himself to be the independent leader of Europe and speaking for many people, millions, tens of millions across the mainland, when he says, I'm not going to allow August 1914 to be the road to World War III. I'm not going to take the road to Sarajevo. I'm going to go to Moscow instead and see if I can head off the potentially imminent open warfare between NATO and Russia. He deserves a lot of credit for that. What is he up to?
Well, I think he wants to be a mediator, and I think that he genuinely wants peace. I mean, if you watch this interview that he gave to Weltwoche, a Swiss magazine, he says, this isn't about me. I really do want peace. As a Christian, I believe that peace is better than war. And he has over and over repeated that Hungary has been repeatedly dragged into wars through alliances with somebody else. And every time Hungary gets dragged into a war, Hungary pays a heavy price. You got World War I, World War II, and now with NATO. And he said we can't go through this again. And he's absolutely said, this is, we had two of these horrific wars in the 20th century. Hungary paid a very heavy price in both. We just can't go through a third world war. And what is astonishing is that he gets attacked for this. You know, all of the EU worthies, all of the it was the Kaja Kallas and Ursula von der Leyen and Charles Michel and Chancellor Scholz, they all condemned him for what? For going to Moscow and discussing what can we do to bring about some kind of a mediation? What can we do to bring about a peace conference? I mean, for that, you get condemned. That's the kind of thing you would expect a leader of Germany to do. That's what Germany should be, which carries a lot more weight than Hungary. A leader of Germany or a leader of France should be acting as a mediator instead of pouring gasoline on the flames.
Quite so. How do you think his initiative will have been taken in Moscow? Are there signs that that these were serious discussions, or was it more for show?
Well, everything depends on what happens in the United States. As you know, George, Orban has very good relations with Trump. And, you know, I don't know, but I'm quite sure that Trump probably got on the phone and asked Orban after he came back, what's your impression? Can we work something out? And if Trump is elected in November and he said, I'm going to get this wrapped up before I'm inaugurated, you know, whether he does or doesn't, that's a different issue. But I think he's going to try. And if he does try, I think Viktor Orban will play a central role because he'll be able to brief him. Look, this is what I got from Zelensky. This is what I got from Putin. If you want to organize some kind of a peace conference, I think this is what you need to put forward. So I think a lot depends on in the United States. If Trump wins, I think Orban could well play a crucial role because he is trusted by both sides.
Who'd have thunk it? Viktor Orban, the peacemaker, the mediator, an extraordinary turn of events. Thanks for your enlightenment on the French situation too. It's a fast-moving situation. You're quite right to say that the fat lady hasn't sung yet. So I've told Gayatri to just put the tickets on the Eurostar on hold for now. Thanks very much, George Szamuely, Senior Research Fellow at Global Policy Institute, author of the excellent book, Bombs for Peace, NATO's Humanitarian War on Yugoslavia. Here's a word about my other show, Have It Out with Galloway. I'm still waiting for this audience of millions to call me up on the video wall so I can see what you look like. Here's something more about it. Now, you're used to telephoning questions into me on my various shows. I've spoken with thousands of you over the last couple of decades. But now, on my new show, you get a chance to appear in person on a video wall. It would be good to see what you looked like as well as what you sounded like. It's very simple to get on my show. Go to www.haveitoutwithgalloway.com. Just register there. We'll get you on the television with me. Come and have a go if you think you're hard enough.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
There are quite a lot of people who think they're hard enough, who are the people who are appearing on the show. I lost track of the last time a friendly face appeared. I don't mind, as you know, I can be pugnacious, but the mix would be improvable, I would say. So, if you want to be in the audience for my next show, check out the website, www.haveitoutwithgalloway.com. The show goes out on Tuesdays at 7 o'clock on my own personal YouTube channel. Now, I mentioned that Daily Telegraph headline just before the break I think my director has pulled it up and maybe on your screen now. There it is. Look, goodbye, Galloway. This was a triumph for Israel. Well, it's true that Israel was definitely present on the streets of Rochdale. And that's just one of the multiple, and I seriously mean multiple, irregularities and breaches of electoral law that I allege, and my lawyers have alleged in papers, already served on Keir Starmer, on the regional director of the Labour Party, the election agent for the Labour Party, on other public bodies in the Rochdale area. That's why I can't say too much about it, because that legal action is already underway. So watch this space. Sam is in Montreal, but wants to talk about the UK elections. This is the Global University of the Airwaves, after all. Sam in Montreal, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I apologize if it wasn't, I didn't explain it properly. I was just drawing the equivalence between what happened in the UK and what we're about to experience in Canada. I'm not sure if you've been following what's been happening in Canada, but Trudeau just lost the third...
what did he lose?
He just lost the third longest held Liberal seat in the country last week. And members of his party are calling on him to resign because his polling is absolutely tragic. Looks like the Liberals are going to be completely wiped out, and that's not a good thing because the alternative to them is the Conservatives. So we're basically one cycle either ahead or behind the UK in the continuing musical chairs of the two asses of the two cheeks of the same backside. All that these Conservatives are proposing to do in the midst of a housing crisis, a cost of living crisis, is to cut a carbon tax. And apparently that's going to make food affordable, housing affordable. Oh, and they're going to dig up more of the dirty oil from Alberta. That's basically their entire policy platform. It's very disturbing what's happening, and it's very discouraging that there's no alternatives, and I'm very disappointed to hear that about what happened in the UK.
Okay, Sam, as Oscar Wilde said on the death scene in Charles Dickens' Little Nell, you'd have to have a heart of stone not to laugh at Trudeau disappearing down the plug hole. I can't tell you how much joy you have just given me. Richard is in Leeds in England on the UK elections. Go ahead, Richard.
My name's not Richard, it's John.
Richard, you there?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. We're having quite a few technical difficulties this evening. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, basically, George, it's nice to speak to you. I'm a bit sad about the elections in Rochdale. I found it a bit weird, but how it happened. But I've no doubt you'll get to the bottom of that, and hopefully you will anyway. But I mean, I've got many subjects to talk about. It's very hard to pin one. But the current election, obviously, we've got a man in power that is just totally false, right? And I call them, and people like my mates and that go, oh, I'm a red all the way, I'm red. And when Labour won, I'm just went, no, they're pale blue. They're not red. They're pale blue. They have nothing to do with... Is the human,
John, is the human equivalent of a Potemkin village. It's just a facade, a cheap suit, and behind it there is nothing. Nothing is behind it. And that is amply demonstrated by bringing back the dregs of the Blair and Brown government. He's got 410 MPs. None of them are good enough to be ministers. He's got to make peers of some of the most discredited husks from the Blair and Brown era and put them in the ministerial posts, proving, apart from anything else, what I said, John, before the election, that Starmer is merely Tony Blair without the laughs, without the pizzazz, without any of Blair's redeeming features. That's how it looks to me. What about you?
Well, it's exactly, you've repeated what I have in my mind, but I don't want to end this conversation, but I've met you once, you don't know that, in Oxford Road, Manchester, with Red 10, and I met you in Finchley, of all places, in Dundee. So I used to live there.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I used to deliver milk there. My goodness. I maybe delivered your milk. 2 pints, bottom left.
No, I think you're...
How wonderful. John, send me a note. We must compare notes. Fintry. My goodness. They had a gang. Were they the Shams? I think they were the Shams. Maybe they're Syrians. I don't know. But I remember they chased me out of Fintry once on a postcode issue. Ian McKillop asks, is Kinnock's daughter-in-law still Prime Minister of Denmark? I've lost track. Me too. Who cares? SC says most far-right and racist nationalists are pro-Israel now. Exceptions are the old school types, Nazi types, like Nick Griffin. And Brian Holden says Starmer makes the possibility of World War III very real. Let's go to Nigeria. Why wouldn't we? Where Tariq wants to talk about UNWRA. Go ahead, Tariq.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir. Okay.
Yes.
Allah bless you and yours. A bit nervous, but I'll try and do a good job. First off, thank you for standing for the elections. Okay. And those in Britain that might be feeling discouraged, the numbers speak louder than the results. Don't let the government fool you. And on UNRWA,
it's true,
Mr. Galloway, I wanted to maybe make a suggestion, you see, because here in Nigeria, really we have almost no knowledge of them. Frankly, I never knew UNRWA existed until October 7th, and I only heard of it from you. And so when we try to be in the situation that is at right now, and do funding and all that stuff, when we try to donate from our part, the payment portals that they have is all in foreign currency, i.e. US dollars, euros, and British pounds. But in our countries, before you can make this kind of donations, it means you have to gather around a huge sum of money. If you want to donate maybe $5 or $10, which is what you can afford, first you have to save for almost pretty much every average Nigerian for almost a year to get $100 worth. Then you can exchange it at the black market. Then you can take $10 to donate to UNRWA. And only then you then convert your currency back to the currency of Nigeria to then use it. You see, if they could just maybe, I don't know, partner up with some people here in the country or something and set up.
Well, I'm sure that someone from the UNRWA will take note of that. It seems extremely unfair. But as you bring up UNRWA, it's worth recalling how quickly all these Western countries, including Britain, cut off the funding to UNRWA on mere allegations by Israel, by Netanyahu's government, that UNRWA staff had been involved in the attack on October 7th. And that turned out to be completely baseless, completely false, evidence-free, a hoax. Another triumph for Israel, just like the victory for their candidate in Rochdale, you might say. But how many of them still have not restored their funding to UNRWA? Months after the story was completely debunked. Well, one of them is Britain. Every week I used to ask the minister, sometimes twice in a day I'd ask the minister, when are you going to restore your funding to UNRWA, which has the legal obligation on behalf of the entire membership of the United Nations to give food, medicine, education to internationally recognized refugees and displaced Palestinian people. It was a tremendous scandal. And now that you've got me on the subject, more than 7 million people have watched my encounter with Piers Morgan on Piers Morgan Uncensored. Although there was 12 minutes missing. Piers said there was 90 minutes, but there was only 78, leaving you wondering what were the 12 minutes that never made it to the screen and why didn't they make it. But most people would agree that the encounter was something of a triumph for me. And one of the things that I said seemed to him to be so outlandish. I might have been a man arrived from Mars in what I was saying. When I said Israel killed a lot of the Israelis themselves. Now, this day, in the English language edition of Haaretz, the most prestigious Israeli newspaper, it is the paper of record in English about all matters pertaining to Israel. It is the most famous Israeli publication on the earth. Haaretz today in English, so nobody can claim they couldn't understand it in Hebrew, said that a vast number of Israelis were killed by Israelis, according to Netanyahu's Hannibal directive. When I said it on Piers Morgan, it's as if he'd never heard of Hannibal, never mind his directive. The Hannibal directive requires Israeli armed forces to kill anything that moves in a hostage-taking situation. Any vehicle on the move with a hostage in it must be destroyed. It's an order. You must kill any Israeli soldier headed for captivity, killing their own people, blaming it on the Palestinians and using it to commit a genocide. War, famine, pestilence, and disease has run rampant, killing and mutilating perhaps now 250,000 out of a population of just 2.3 million. The equivalent in France or Britain or the United States would be tens of millions of dead and amputated and mutilated people, their jaws severed from their faces, their heads severed from their bodies in huge numbers, on video, all in pursuit of a Hannibal directive, which Haaretz believes may well have been organized by themselves. They moved the Nova Music Festival to the close proximity of the Gaza wire just a couple of days before the Hamas and other resistance faction crossed the wire. And they removed 4 brigades of Israeli soldiers that would otherwise have been around the wire and moved them to the West Bank to play their part in the disaster that is unfolding there in the rest of the occupied territories. I'll be talking with Dr. Francesca Albanese of the United Nations, the special rapporteur for the occupied territories, on Have It Out with Galloway, which I shall record tomorrow and which will go out on Tuesday. You don't want to miss it, I promise you. Elliot is in Florida on the U.S. election debate disaster. Go ahead, Elliot.
Hi, George. Thank you. But first, thank you for mentioning that Harris article that just came out. Extremely important timing. And also condolences on your loss. Yeah, I can speak for myself and I know that all the commentators, the leftists that are your fans over here on the other side of the pond, how crestfallen and shocked we were at your loss. But you are a force of nature.
It was a shock. It was a shock to those who weren't there and saw it taking shape, saw it being shaped. But don't worry, Elliot. All will be revealed, and the story definitely isn't over yet. But go ahead, Elliot. Most kind of you.
Well, yeah, and we know you're a force of nature, so we know that it'll turn out in positive. But as far as the debate, I'm not sure you're aware of, you must know Kim Iverson. I'm sure you know Kim Iverson. And,
yes, she's been on the show, and I've been on her show.
And Brianna Joy Gray, they had a big head-to-head discussion, very powerful discussion on the debate afterwards about Biden and his dementia. And Kim Iverson had a very interesting take on it. She thought that because for months the rumblings around Washington and in the press and the Democrats have been, how do we get rid of Biden? And that there have been those behind-the-scenes rumblings. She felt that he was led to the slaughter, like a lamb to the slaughter in that debate. And the more evidence is that the media just jumped on it immediately, usually the ones that are supporting him, jumped on it, and it seemed, in her mind, it was orchestrated. And I was wondering what you might think of that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not one of these who automatically jumps to the conspiracy theory, because in my life, most things have been a cock-up rather than a conspiracy. But this debate was held earlier than any other presidential debate has ever been held, which seems to me to point so obviously at the option being opened that if Biden tanked, that there would be more time to get rid of him. Imagine if the convention had already met, if Biden was now legally the Democratic candidate, and then they had the debate, as would normally be the case, there would be no time left at all to recover from that, to replace him with anyone else, and so on. So the fact that they forced old Joe into such an early debate in June for an election which won't occur until November, and in which neither candidate has yet been officially picked as the candidate, that all points to a deliberate ploy. They may have been going to give him the benefit of the doubt. Okay, Joe, you say you can do it. Show us you can do it, and it'll be full speed ahead. But do it early so that if you break down on screen, in public, in front of the world, we'll still have time to get rid of you. So I do come down on that side of that particular argument. Elliot, thanks for that lovely call from sunny Florida. RB is in Canada. Let's hear from RB. Go ahead, RB.
Greetings, George. Congratulations to England for going through to the semifinals in the Euro Cup, and congratulations to our Canadian team that went through to the semifinals in the Copa America Cup. Of course, your reward is to play the Dutch. Our reward is to play Argentina and Lionel Messi. So I think you guys have a better shot.
Well, I'm not English myself, but I do support many of the England players. I don't like their manager, and I certainly don't like their cheerleaders. So it's always a mixed thing for someone like me, RB. You don't want automatically to want England to lose, but hey, I've got a Dutch wife, and so what can I do? Go ahead, RB.
I was also going to express my disappointment at you're losing your seat, and I was also disappointed with Andrew Bridgen losing his seat. I was very impressed with how he fought back against what they were doing with the mandates, especially with the vaccine, and I was kind of fearing that the Labour government would take a majority, because now that they're in charge, it's one of the first meetings Sir Keir Starmer had was with Bill Gates. That can't be good.
Yeah.
And more ominous, appointing Patrick Vallance as science minister, a man who single-handedly maybe
unbelievable, yeah,
caused a horrible reaction with his ill-advised COVID mandates and restrictions that turned what could have been handled quite nicely into a complete debacle. And I'm also a little bit worried.
Imagine if you were an elected Labour MP. Yeah, imagine if you're one of the 410 elected Labour MPs, imagining that you might end up as a minister, including many people that were already shadow ministers. And they're parachuting in jokers like Vallance and putting them into the Lords and giving them the ministerial briefs, including, as I've said, some of the most discredited cretins from the Blair-Brown era. It is a remarkable thing. Now tell me this, we had a caller a minute ago from Montreal. Do you see the writing on the wall for Trudeau also?
Absolutely. He's taking a long walk in a short pier. It's a 50-50 whether he'll resign before the next election, but he will definitely lose. But like in England, our Conservative Party is just as much beholden to globalist forces as the Liberal Party, and there might be a few cosmetic changes, but they're going to go down the same path of the neoliberal, neocon agenda, both domestically and nationally. I don't see us changing policies in regards to the Middle East or to Ukraine. Everything's got to be solved at a local level, from a grassroots up. To get involved in your local elections and pay attention to what's going on.
It sounds like we need a new Popular Front in Canada, as they have in France, and as I hope Jeremy Corbyn will lead here in Britain. Thanks, RB, for that. Now, it's being reported the French Prime Minister, Gabriel Attal, is offering to resign as party leaders digest the astonishing exit poll tonight. And Marine Le Pen has just said that Macron's position is now untenable. Let's stay with Canada, I think. Am I still on Canada, Dennis?
Hi.
Dennis, welcome.
How are you doing, sir?
By the grace of God, good. Thank you very much. What do you want to talk about?
I saw a video about I thought it was an American politician that I think sat down with Rishi Sunak and talked about making it so that the election it seemed like he was talking like the election in Great Britain is somehow going to be rigged so that who the neocons, I guess, want to win the election will win, kind of thing.
It's undoubtedly rigged. It's undoubtedly rigged, Dennis, in the sense that the relentless hunting down of anyone with a view outside the prevailing orthodoxy, the relentless smearing and slander and hunting down of those, the keeping off the television, keeping off the debates, keeping off the platforms of anyone that is outside that prevailing orthodoxy, the ceaseless 24/7 effort to channel like sheep going into a slaughterhouse, the people on that pathway, that narrow pathway, where Tweedledee and Tweedledum are the only choice, where the two cheeks of the same backside have to be chosen, one or the other, that nothing else outside of that prevailing orthodoxy can get a fair hearing, will escape endless persecution, and will be in any way given a free and fair chance in this democracy of ours. But there's also other forms of rigging. And I've said this before, but I'm amazed at it. That's why I'm saying it again. It took me nearly 50 years in politics to even think that a British election could be literally rigged in a banana republic way. Nearly 50 years. It never crossed my mind. And I feel foolish now, because if you think about what we do elsewhere in the world, making coups and overthrowing other people's governments, invading and occupying other people's countries, murdering political dissidents, assassinating political leaders, when even in our own country, in the north of Ireland, over centuries actually, we did that when Ireland and Britain were one country. We executed, assassinated, massacred, starved, hunted down anyone with an inconvenient view that Ireland should be a free and independent and united country. And we had a war in the north of Ireland. So we know what we did in the north of Ireland in the late 1960s until comparatively recently, and the peace processes and so on. So that's why I feel foolish, because I knew what we did elsewhere and even in a part of our own country. But it still never occurred to me that British elections literally could be rigged. Well, all I can say at this moment is that I no longer think that way. Sarkar is in Glasgow. Let's hear from him. Go ahead, the legend. Sarkar, what do you want to talk about?
Yeah, George, I'll be honest. First of all, thanks so much for taking my call. See, I know this guy, Keir Starmer, has got a 400-seat majority. I'll be honest, George, I can see doomsday signals, and allow me to explain, please, if you don't mind. Because right now, this is not the Labour Party of any Tony Benn of Barbara Castle. This Labour Party is literally the wet dream of Margaret Thatcher, started in 1997 by the great Sir Tony Blair. Yes, I call him Sir Tony Blair because you need to give that man respect. After all, he has done amazing things. Iraq, Afghanistan invasion, literally making Labour much more right-wing than Thatcher could have imagined with Red Bull and caffeine intake. I'll be honest. And the reason why I'm even more scared is because Keir Starmer as well as Tony Blair have openly said that, yeah, we both call up each other. That's from the Independent, on the newspapers. I'm not making that up, George. They clearly said, yes, I'm calling each other. Yes, we speak to each other, consult with each other. Consult with Tony Blair, the man who obliterated Iraq, Afghanistan. But you know, George, the signs of bombing fantasies of Tony Blair was not just simply from Afghanistan and Iraq. That man kept on filling the ears of Bill Clinton as soon as he became the prime minister so that he can go and bomb Yugoslavia. We all know that. NATO had their issues with Yugoslavia right from the days of Joseph Tito. But ever since Tony Blair came, he kept on filling the ears of Bill Clinton so they could go and start their escapades, their adventures in Yugoslavia. This man is an out-and-out warmonger, and if this man is advising our prime minister with 400 seats in the parliament, I don't see any good signs, George. I'd like to hear your views if you don't mind.
Well, not only is he the chief advisor, Peter Mandelson is his right-hand man again as the second advisor to Starmer. Now, I'd say this. Talk about corruption. Talk about rigging. Talk about electoral malfeasance. No television journalist has once asked Keir Starmer's advisor, Peter Mandelson, why were you such a close friend of the convicted and suicided child sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein? Why did you stay in his house? Why did he take you to a boutique and buy you a nice white belt to put round your slender waist. Why were you calling him up in jail in Florida? Why were you so close to the Mossad frontman, Jeffrey Epstein? And now that we know that that's what you were, why is the new Prime Minister of Britain retaining you as one of his chief principal advisors? And why is every television channel in the land allowing him to sit there and slander others with a record unchallenged like he has? Gotta go, Sarkar, you may be a legend, but Gayatri is my good wife. What's rattling, Gayatri?
First of all, happy to be back in the studio, sitting next to you.
Yeah.
So much is rattling about the UK election in general. Sarkar example in point. Everyone, having seen the results and having seen the statistics, can see the mirage. This democracy is...
It's a Potemkin village, yeah? I mean, it's
absolutely.
A front. There's nothing behind it.
No.
It was the lowest turnout since 1883. The lowest turnout. So the real winners were the people who didn't actually vote at all. Lowest turnout since 1883. He got millions of votes fewer than the hated Jeremy Corbyn got in 2017.
Yes.
And even less voters than Corbyn got in 2019, when they described that as the worst Labour election performance in history. But they'd done worse than that.
But what do you think this does for the electorate? They will see that only a third voted for Starmer's Labour, but they got 2/3 of the seats in Parliament. How ridiculous. So it's becoming a spiral downwards in which the electorate is getting demotivated and those in power can remain in their clique, in the clique that they choose through the House of Lords, as you described.
Not content with the rigged election.
Because rigged they
are.
are.
Going over the heads of the rigged elected MPs and bringing back from the grave JacquiSmith. JacquiSmith. Is that the best they could do?
I know, because she's the one everyone knows from your clip from the BBC Andrew Neil show, in which you said to her in her face, pointing that she killed 1 million people in Iraq and all she could do is smug.
She rolled her eyes, yeah.
Now, Maura says, the world is all the poorer after the loss of your seats. I'm devastated for me, my grandchildren, Europe and the planet. But no worries, Maura. Sam puts it this way. You have far better things to do. Being an MP is a waste of time. Standing up during PMQs and not being called to speak, the worst occasion being when you and Diane Abbott were both ignored, and then allowed to speak at off hours to a nearly empty house with only few presents, only there for their own purpose and not really showing particular interest in anything you say. So it's all futile. In contrast, you are reaching millions, huge numbers on this show. So keep up the good works. Use your time speaking and organizing at the grassroots level. So take the election results as a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a blessing for us personally. I'm sleeping in my own bed tonight, which I haven't done for a long time. In fact, I haven't done really since the beginning of February.
No.
And with my own wife. Is that too personal? On a personal level, it's a blessing in disguise. And there's a lot in what was said, though I was trying to do both.
Yes,
to be a member of Parliament and reaching millions on these platforms and so on. But I will be able to put more thought into how we develop the MOATS brand, into MOATS TV, in which every day there will be a MOATS program of some kind. Might not always be on politics, but it will be interesting. And
let's just say we've got some plans in mind.
Yeah, right? We've got plans. I don't mean, I wasn't going to give them away. Married men will know that look that I just got there. But the people I feel sorry for are our campaigners and our voters who consider themselves robbed and they've had to exchange me for an insignificant person, never known before. He will never be known in the future. Not even a legend in his own street in leafy Kingston upon Thames.
In London?
In London. So I feel sorry for that. But you know what I feel most sorry about? All those children that used to run, literally run when they saw us, poking their little hands through the school gates to shake hands and chasing after the car and so on.
So I'll testify to that because obviously I'm always with you, and I was everywhere with you in Rochdale, on the streets, campaigning everywhere. We would canvass the school runs, and you just standing there, or you going from A to B, or even on our last day after polling day, us going into a restaurant. The children would all recognize George, and they would all run after George, shouting. They were literally running. As we were in the car, driving past, the kids would run past, George Galloway, George Galloway, George Galloway, and it would say, Free Palestine.
All of them, that was always their parting shot. Free Palestine.
I can. The most memorable was when we were stood at the school gate with literally fence between us and the kids. We weren't there to call upon the kids. The kids were far away from us, but they spotted you. They spotted you and they ran towards the fence. And they, with their hand, as you said, with their fingers through the fence, trying to shake hands with you. By the grace of God. So don't worry, the legacy is there, and that will remain so. So Nas and Kabir say, thank you, George. I'm not sad that you lost your seat because I can see the monumental spirit that you are and have proven to be. I'm not surprised that you're not treated fairly, but the seeds that you have planted amongst the kids here, especially, and the collective effort means that at least there continues to be opposition. You may not be the glory some of us know you are, but you are the light behind the scenes, guiding us all who look for real leaders to inspire our hearts and put fire in our bellies for change. Dr. Dreams, in addition, I salute George for the 54 parliamentary days he served in the Commons, for the world and for Rochdale. He was so needed there. The 1,500 hypocrites who made him lose need to bury their heads in shame. Labour is a Zionist party. Those shameless, cowardice Muslims who voted for Labour will answer for their decisions.
Yeah,
so
if George, 750 people who voted Labour had voted for me instead, then I'd still have those letters after my name. But I've had them many times. I've been elected 7 times, 7 parliamentary terms. I've already spent well over half of my adult life in Parliament. I do feel that I've kind of done enough there. As you know, it was not my intention to run again once I'd won the by-election. I was asking people, please lend me your vote for Gaza, and they did, and maybe I should have quit while I was ahead. But the people demanded that I run again.
And that's
thousands of them. And that's why I did. But as I say, it's not over. The fat lady hasn't yet sung.
What's this space?
I've got to go to France. Can I do that?
Let's
do you mind?
Let's go to France.
I mean, you come with me.
Okay, exactly. I've got those tickets booked now, so.
John is in France. Vive la France. John, go ahead.
A Welshman over in France, George, as well.
Excellent, mate. Excellent.
George,
what happened?
Met you once.
Who's won?
Exactly. I had enough of Mr. Kinnock, I think. You put him in his place early on. George, I just wanted to say, I've been watching you tonight. Myself and my wife, we tune in. We've been patron supporters of yours for quite a while now as well. You're more than welcome here with us anytime, you and your family. But I'll tell you what, George,
Excellent.
At the start of the show, I could see a little bit of that fire wasn't there tonight. But my God, you got it by the end of it. You're back on course, and you remember what people have just been saying, what Gayatri's just been reading out to you. Millions watch you now, George. You said to me when I came to see you a few years back, when you were with Mr. Livingston doing a show in Manchester, you said to me, I waited to speak to you at the end of the show, and you said to me, just lose the fear, John. Do what life needs you to do. And we did. We came over to live in France. My son has since met you, and he's also met Gayatri at one of the talks you did just outside of Manchester a couple of years back now. Lose the fear again, George. Don't let it come back in your eyes. Don't take no notice of these idiots who are back in charge now. Millions are following you now. You've caused an eruption in our system. Keep going, George. Please keep going.
Yeah. Oh, I will. John, first of all, my love to you, your missus, your family, and you're most kind in what you said and the kind offer that you made. I'll let you in on a secret. The show was a technical disaster in the first few minutes. You have no idea what was going on in my ear and on my apparatus here in front of me. So it wasn't a loss of fire, it was a technical misfiring. I will never ever lose my fire. I believe I'm on the right path, on the path of justice, no matter who for, no matter who against. I'm guided by my conscience, what I call my daily communion with God, and I will always be on that path, and I will always press my case with the utmost vigor. So don't mistake what happened at the beginning of the show with any loss of vim or vigor on my part. The struggle continues, or as they might say in France, the lutte continua. The results of the French election may or may not have me on the Eurostar on Monday to see Mélenchon, but I am in France quite often. Now that I'm no longer in Parliament, it will be more often, and I follow events there as closely as I can in the circumstances. So maybe, God willing, we'll meet again. John in France, who loves MOATS and who was very kind about me. I honestly mean this to those who are sad that I'm no longer in Parliament. Don't cry for me. I have more than enough in my life to make me happy and make me influential. I will have more influence with one broadcast than the person who defeated me in Rochdale has ever or will ever have in their entire life. The hyenas can dance on the lion's grave, but they can never be a lion. Remember that. I'll be back with Have It Out with Galloway on Tuesday night. If you want to join the show, please email haveitoutwithgalloway.com tomorrow so that you can be on the show. And God willing, I'll be back on Wednesday for the midweek Mother of All Talk shows. It's been marvelous. I hope it was for you too.